Chapter 1. You know too much. You have seen too much to forget. Your hands still smell of old paper and shredded leather when you leave the library where you find the final evidence, the names of the dead, how they died, and who provided the services. Zachariah Osborne was more than a pharmacist. He was the gateway to a network, the kind of business that no one dares to keep on the books. No licenses, no invoices, just lists. You clutch the copy of the list. Your name is at the bottom. Mark Easterbrook. Handwritten. The ink is still damp. When you step out onto the street, the night has fallen like a black velvet curtain. The yellow lights are reflected on the wet pavement. Everything seems peaceful, a false peace, like soft music in an operating room. You cross the small road toward the car parked at the edge of the square. No one follows, no one in the rearview mirror. But you know, they always come later. Your room at the Golden Anchor Hotel has not changed since this morning. The desk lamp is still on. The letter lies on the table, unopened. You have no intention of returning to this place, but there is nowhere else to go now. You open the envelope. Inside was a gray card with thin black letters. Some ink never dries. Stop now, or become what you chase. No signature, no return address. You light a cigarette. The breath comes out thick like smoke from an old print. The wind blows through the open window. Someone has been in here, though everything is intact. You smell ink and silver. A strange metallic taste sweeps across your tongue. You touch your collar, a small burn on the back of your neck. Not sure if it's from shaving or the needle. You make tea. The boiling water crackles, like someone's heartbeat about to break. When you take a sip, you feel your lips numb. You spit it out immediately, rinse it off, but it's too late. You have read about it. Thallium, colorless, odorless, tasteless. Early symptoms: fatigue, hair loss, metal in mouth. Final symptoms slow, painful death. No one knows the reason. You sit down on the chair, holding the phone. Don't call the police. Don't call the doctor. You know those people can't help. You call one person, the only person, whose side you're not sure you're on. Hermia. The bell rings 3 times. Stop. No one answered. You take the file from your briefcase. The dead man's name. Osborne's handwritten note. An old photograph of the pale horse, with 3 women looking straight into the camera as if they had seen you before you arrived. You know you don't have much time left, but there is still enough to trace back. No running away, no revenge, but record, flip, pin. You open your notebook. Write the first line in black ink. This is the story of how the hunter became inventory. And you write on until memory turns into evidence, until the black ink turns to blood. Chapter 2. The list grows. You wake up in the middle of the night to a knock on the door. No rush, no panic. A deliberate rhythm, like someone was tapping out a funeral rhyme. You do not speak up. You step out, barefoot on the cold wooden floor, one hand holding the paper knife, the other gently pulling back the window curtain. The hallway is dark. No one, no footprints, just a black envelope lying neatly on the threshold. You don't open right away. You leave it on the table, opposite the cold old cup of tea from last night. You wash your face, take a sip of water, sit down, then open the letter. Inside was a small piece of ash gray paper, the handwritten ink almost blending with the background. The first sentence made your heart run cold. Sylvia Stanwell, deceased, 2:43 a.m. You squeezed the paper until it wrinkled in your hand. Sylvia, the friend you initially investigated with, the one who whispered to you that it all started with a wrong name, the only one who dared to say that witch was a cover and that death was a mathematical formula, not a curse. She is dead. Right after you find the list, as soon as you start rewriting the truth, you reopen the list. Sylvia was in the middle. No slashes, no signs of being crossed out. Just one little symbol you hadn't noticed before, 3 slanted dots at the beginning of the line. The same symbol as the threatening letter you'd received last night. You turn the page, start writing down the remaining names. Unconsciously, you count 7 people. Dad is dead. 1 is you. 3 left. You don't know them. Not yet. The morning passes in a blur. You step outside, hat and sunglasses on, as if to shield yourself from the gaze of someone watching from the balcony across the street. You go to the public library. No one knows who you are there. You look up the 4th name on the list, Bridget Ackroyd. Lives in a suburb called Little Radnor. Used bookstore owner. According to Old Town records, you call the store. No one answered the phone. You wait a few more minutes. Call back. Still no response. You return to the hotel to find your room door ajar. You don't come in right away. You go through. Go upstairs. Quietly follow the side stairs. Sneak out onto the balcony and look down. There is someone in your room. A man in an ebony jacket stood at the table, looking over the notebook you had left behind. He was in no hurry. He read each line as if he were reading a morning newspaper. You grabbed your phone and took a picture of him through the frosted glass. He turned around just as you put the phone down. That look takes your breath away. Not that you recognize him, but because he recognizes you. You wait 2 hours after he leaves before returning to your room. Everything is still there. Nothing is lost. Except a list sheet. It disappeared. Instead, there was a scrawled message written in red ink on the bathroom mirror. The list doesn't matter. Only who's reading it. You get the point. Lists are never the whole truth. It's a trap. Once you start reading, you have entered the circle. Death does not choose people. Readers choose for themselves. Chapter 3, Ghosts at the Pale Horse. You decide to go back to where it all started, the Pale Horse. Nowhere else is there more question than the dusty walls of that suburban house. Nowhere else is there a place where memories and lies intertwine like dead vines on a rotten roof. The road to Much Deeping Village was unchanged. The trees were still dark. The old signs rusted, and the leaden sky seemed ready to swallow up any trace of light. You arrive at dusk. The house was still there, but there was no light in the windows, no bird song, no cars, no smoke from the chimney. There was only silence, the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. You knock 3 times. The rotten wood creaks. No one answers. You try the doorknob. It's locked. You step in. The inside is not what you remember. Gone is the smell of herbal medicine. Gone are the round tables with melted candles. The objects that once created the witchy atmosphere are gone. Only empty shapes of lies remain. You follow the clues. The carpet is pushed aside as if someone has turned over the floorboards. The painting is tilted to reveal signs of having been removed from the wall. In the middle of the room is an object you wouldn't expect to see: a Remington typewriter. Paper, still in the roller. The words, unfinished. They know now. The pale horse no longer serves them. You sit down. On the table, there was an open, dry ink bottle. Another sheet of paper lies face down under the typewriter, as if hastily forgotten. You turn it over. It's your picture, drawn in black charcoal. Your eyes are crossed out in the painting. You hear breathing, not mine. You stand up, turn around, no one. You walk into the hallway that leads to the kitchen. The door is still open. An antique mirror hangs askew on the wall, and in it, you see 3 silhouettes standing behind you. You turn around. There's no one. The mirror still reflects them. Immobility, no talking. You look closely and see that it's not a person. They are copies of old paintings, images of the 3 witches who once lived here, but now they live in mirrors. You step back, heart pounding. You leave the house. Don't look back. When you get to your car, you find an envelope tucked under the windshield wiper. You open it. Just one line: you shouldn't have come back. And below, it is a copy of your drawing on carbon paper, with the date of death filled in Tuesday, 11:47 a.m. You look at your watch. 11:32 a.m. Chapter 4. The pharmacist vanishes. You run from much deeping like the devil is scratching at your rearview mirror. Not because you fear the invisible, but what is seen is even more terrifying. And now, you're left with only one tangible clue. Zachariah Osborne, the pharmacist, the purveyor of thallium on demand, the one who started it all without leaving a trace. You drive straight to his pharmacy in Paddington. The brown shop, the silver-gray striped awning, the name Osborne's Remedies still dangling like a piece of skin from an old carcass. But inside, nobody, no doorbell ringing, no chemical smell, just empty. You walk in, the lights are still on, the ledger was still on the counter, open to the middle of the page. You glance through, hoping to find a bill, a prescription, a line of text that exposes the killer. But what you see is a white sheet of paper sandwiched in the middle, with exactly one line of red ink. You're not the only one they want now. You look around. Everything is still there. The closed bottle of thallium, the old tape recorder under the drawer, the box of hair samples, a small booklet that says, "Free yourself from karma." You don't understand. Zachariah is the tight link between death and organization. Why did he disappear? You go to the back warehouse. The medicine cabinet was open. The dust of the medicine floated like a poisonous fog. There's a half-full bottle of wine on the table. You see dried lipstick on the rim of the bottle, but Zachariah lives alone. Maybe on the wall there was something written in blood, or something very similar, a spiral-like symbol next to 3 characters. The soul. You take a picture again. Just then, your phone rings. No number. You pick up the phone. The voice on the other end of the line seemed to echo from the mouth of a well. "We made him vanish. Like we'll do to you. Leave the ink alone." You do not answer. You turn off the machine. Stand still for a few seconds. No one can threaten you anymore. Not while Sylvia's blood is still in your memory. Not while the list still appears every night like a curse written on your skin. You leave the pharmacy, but after taking a few steps, you stop. In the display mirror of the shop next door, You see a figure in a black cloak standing inside Osborne's shop, right where you just left. You turn back. Nobody, only the glass, reflects you, and a line of words written with a finger on the glass dust. Who wrote your name on the list? Mark. You stand there. For the first time, you ask yourself, are you the one who signed your own death warrant? Cool. Chapter 5. Poisoned words. You returned to the hotel when it was raining. Raindrops pounded against the glass like a persistent knock from a stranger. Every detail resurfaced in your mind: the spiral, the Greek symbol, the threats, the reflection in the mirror, all of it woven together like a spider web clinging to your skin. You turn on the light in your room. On the table is your notebook, still there, but not intact. Some of the pages are torn. You open it. In the middle of the notebook is a new note, not yours. Ink is poisoned speech. The writer does not survive. You pull your fountain pen from your pocket and uncap it. The black ink is still there, but your wrist is shaking slightly. For the first time, you feel words can kill. You turn on the tape recorder, the copy you got from Osborne's drugstore. The tape begins to play slowly, rattling like the gears of broken memory. Zachariah's voice rang out, nasal, even, emotionless. To those in need, we don't kill anyone. They die on their own, at the right time, in the right way. We just leave a hint. You hear the sound of pages turning. The voice continued. If someone hears this and continues, they choose the path of reflection. Like Mark, like Sylvia. Your name recorded, not by accident. You rewind, listen again. Like Mark, you sit still. Your breathing is shallow. Zachariah knew you before you even started this investigation, before you even found the list. You weren't caught up in it by accident. You were chosen. You step into the bathroom, turn on the cold water, and wash your face. In the mirror, your eyes are red and puffy, not from lack of sleep, but from something draining inside you. You can't trust anyone. No one is on your side anymore. You pick up the phone and call Hermia. This time, she picked up. Her voice was hoarse and tired. Mark, you shouldn't have called. I'm being followed. By whom? You ask. Silent. Then she whispered, as if she were leaning close to the receiver. I found the name of the person who added you to the list. Your heart leaps. You hiss. Who is it? Silence again. She replied, very softly. Me. Chapter 6. Betrayal in red ink. Me. The word rang out like a silent gun. No smoke. No bang. But still pierced through you like a cold bullet. Hermia, the only friend you still trust. The only person you ever loved. The person who wrote your name on the death list. Why? Your voice almost lost its meaning. You hear her breathing. Slow, ragged. Mark, you don't understand. At that time, I didn't think it was real. I thought it was just a game, a psychological punishment. Nothing really happened. You are silent, not because of forgiveness, but because you can hear the fear in her voice more clearly. They came to me after you started investigating. I thought, if I gave them a name, just one, I would be out of the loop. No one died. They just needed a new target. You sit down, phone pressed to your forehead. On the table, the fountain pen is still leaking ink slowly, like blood dripping from a lie. You won't die. Mark, she whispered. You laugh dryly, like rotten paper. Are you sure? There is a way out. How? Write someone else's name. Redo the spiral. Silent. Already, Osborne didn't disappear. He was taken away. You grip the machine tightly. Where is he? A house in Holloway called the Labyrinth. No one outside the system can get in. But there is one person. Another name. No. A tattoo. On the right wrist. Whoever has it gets in. You look down at your wrist. There's only the faint needle mark you noticed the other day. Suddenly, you remember when you woke up in the hotel after the first cup of thallium-tainted tea. You felt the metallic taste, the numbness, and a strange symbol printed on your wrist. You think it's an illusion. You go into the bathroom and roll up your sleeves. It's still there, a black circle with 3 crisscrossing spirals inside, identical to the blood-stained symbol on the Osborne house wall. You sit down, breathing heavily. They chose you, not to kill, but to send inside. You are the mail carrier. You are the inn. You are the next part in the ritual. The phone is still on. You ask if I go in there. Will you help me? Hermia sighed, sounding like she was about to cry. I'm not sure who can help who anymore. You turn off the machine. Take out the notebook. Write a line at the bottom of the list. Whoever writes my name already knows the end. You cross out your name. Then write a new name. Hermia, not for revenge, but because she started this story in red ink. Now, it's your turn to write the conclusion in black ink. Chapter 7. The Labyrinth. You arrive in Holloway at midnight. The street was dim, as if the streetlights were afraid to see where you were about to enter. The old neighborhood, moss-covered brick walls, boarded-up windows, a place where no one lived, but many died. You stand in front of a black iron gate, no sign, no bell, just a hidden camera in the corner of the wall, glowing red like an eye that has been waiting for you for a long time. You hold out your right wrist. The light sweeps across. The door opened without a sound. You enter the labyrinth. Inside is a long hallway with no doors, just the walls, cold, black walls that reflected you on both sides like the mirrors of a haunted circus. At the end of the hallway was a heavy, red bronze door. You push gently. It opens as if it were ready. The room inside was large and empty, except for a metal table in the middle, where a man sat waiting. You recognized Zachariah Osborne immediately, but he was no longer himself. His skin was as pale as old paper. His hands shook, but his eyes shone with a cold intelligence, as if he had learned things no one should learn. "Hello, Mark," he said. You don't ask how he knows your name. No need anymore. You just ask, "What the hell is going on?" Osborne picked up a file from the table and pushed it toward you. "Sit down," he said, and read, "If you want to live." You open the file. Inside is a copy of every death you've ever investigated. They all have something in common. A final message, handwritten, in identical handwriting. You look at him. Who wrote it? He replied, "Nobody writes it. They just think it." Osborne stood up and walked to the wall behind him. Touch 3 points. A secret door opens. Behind was a small, windowless room with dozens of typewriters, each one working automatically. No one touched. They typed themselves. On each machine is a piece of paper with a name. You recognize some of the names: Sylvia, Delphine, Lejeune, and yours. You look at Osborne. He nodded. A thought long enough will become an action. Enough people believe you will die. And you will die. You ask, "Are you talking about magic?" He smiled, cold as steel. "No, I'm talking about trust being exploited as a weapon." You walk up to the machine that is typing your name. You pull the paper out. The machine stops. No alarm, no response. You burn it in the middle of the room, watching the piece of paper turn to ash. Osborne smirked. No one ever does that. Good. You say, now it's my turn to write. You take out your fountain pen. Put the new paper on the table. Write a line. He who writes the rules can also rewrite the ending. You look at him. He asked, what do you want to do? You smiled faintly. Get everyone out of the maze. Chapter 8. Exit wound. You leave the labyrinth before dawn. Holloway Street was as silent as a cemetery, except that the dead here still walked at night. In your hand is a copy of Osborne's file name, date of death, method of death, and the last thing they were thinking. You read each line carefully, as if they were the remnants of some dark magic you had yet to decipher. The most obvious common point, every death begins with a thought. Asikomeis, not a pill, not toxic, just a timely whisper. You return to your room. The lights are on. The door is ajar. You draw your gun small, cool, more trustworthy than a human. You step in. Hermia was sitting there. She had a cup of tea in her hand, but she hadn't drunk it yet. You asked bluntly, are they following you? She shook her head. They don't need it. I gave it all away. And now, what do you want? She looked at you. Her eyes were red and tired. I want you to live. You laugh. It echoes like a gunshot in the small room. Live. You put the file on the table. Who lives when the ending is written in their head? Hermia took something out of her pocket, a photograph. You pick it up. This is a photo taken from a surveillance camera at the train station. The day Sylvia died. The angle of the photo is blurry, but there is someone standing behind Sylvia, not you. A woman in a black cloak. No face, no shadow. You look at Hermia. Who is it? She swallowed. Her name was Jessie Davis. She was a psychologist for a mind control project. She disappeared in 1963. But according to Osborne, she never died. You squeeze the photo. A ghost. A real person. An old program. A new cult. Whatever it was, Jessie was the one who planted the idea in the victims' minds. And now into your head. Where is she? Hermia opened her wallet and pulled out an old, faded bus ticket. Endpoint Harrowfield Asylum. An abandoned mental asylum where she used to work, she said. Where all the experiments began. You walked to the door. Hermia stood up and took your hand. If you go, you might not come back. You looked deep into her eyes. That's why I go. It's raining again outside. You step into the darkness, gun in hand. This time, there was no way to find out who was behind the scenes, but to tear it apart. Chapter 9. The Whispering Ward. Harrowfield Asylum rises from the mist like an unredeemed sin. 4 floors of cold stone. The roof curved like a scythe. Rusty iron doors hung like the teeth of a hungry beast. Above the old trap door was a peeling nameplate. Only 2 words were legible. Ward Prix. You stand in front of the building. Rain falling on your shoulders. A cold gun at your side. No one is waiting for you, except for the whispers from inside, as thin as the last breath of someone who once believed in the light. You push the door. The hinges creaked like a strangled scream. Musty smell. Steel smell. Something like, old fear. You turn on the flashlight. The wall is covered with graffiti. They whisper what we dare not think. The thought is the knife. The mouth is the handle. Jessie is listening. You step deep inside. The hallways are empty. The windows are small like dead fish eyes. You look through the cracks. In each room. There is a chair. a small table, and the walls are covered with old tapes. All open, all are playing. You put your ear to a roll. A woman's voice spoke. Calm, slow. What did you think before that person died? Did you ever imagine yourself leaving everything behind? If I said you deserve to be erased, would you believe me? You step back, chilling. That voice was Jesse's. You keep walking, your footsteps echoing like a erratic heartbeat. Third floor, you find room 309. The door has a spiral symbol. Below it are 3 letters, D. Plo. Oh, you open the door. There was nothing left inside but a leather chair with its back to the door. On the wall is a one-way mirror. You step forward. Her voice comes from somewhere. Maybe from the machine. Maybe from inside your head. Mark, you're finally here. You ask, without turning your back. Jesse Davis. The name doesn't matter. The belief does. They believe in me. Believe in the destruction of thoughts. And you are starting to believe, aren't you? You turn around, gun raised, light swivel chair. No one sitting. There was only a red cassette tape lying there. You take it. On the ice, there is a handwritten message. Final instruction for Mark Easterbrook. You don't open the tape. You leave the room, heart pounding. On the way out, you find yourself walking faster, as if the house is catching up with you. Every step, every breath, every unanswered question. You get back in your car, close the door, and lock it. The tape is still in hand. You think, I won't listen to it, but your heart knows you will, because the real fear is not death, but not knowing why I died. Chapter 10. Final instruction. You turn on the cassette player at 3:07 a.m. The room was so quiet, you could hear the tape rolling. The sound was like skin being scraped clean of layers of memories. On the table, a cup of cold tea. Outside the window, the streetlights flickered like blind eyes trying to wake up him. The tape started running. Her voice rang out, not distorted, not broken, not ghostly, just clear, calm, almost kind. Mark, if you're listening to this, it means I won. Or at least it's time you understood. You sit motionless, hand gripping the gun, useless against words. I don't kill people. I don't have to touch them. I just talk. I plant seeds. And they grow on their own. The voice paused for a moment. Enat ashanoid. Then continued. You are the last case. The only one chosen not to die, but to reflect. You frown. Your heart starts to beat irregularly. You are the test. If a person knows the program, the whole game, and still can't escape, then I'm right. No magic needed. Just an idea. You stand up. Your hands are shaking, not from fear, but because you realize what she said is true. You had that idea from the start, from the moment you see your first death, from the moment your name is on the list, from the moment you know you have no control over your own ending. The tape is still running. You have 2 choices, Mark. 1, continue investigating. Write someone else's name. Step into my shoes. 2, cross yourself off the list the only way left. She stopped. You thought it was all over. But after a few seconds of silence, the final sentence rang out. As light as a breath. Or you can create a third option. If you are strong enough. You sit back, open notebook. The list of dead appeared. Each name now like a knife cutting into your will. At the bottom is your name. Crossed out, then rewritten. You pull out your pen, dip the nib into the ink, and for the first time since it all began, you don't write. You stand up, take the tape, and step out onto the balcony. It was just dawn. You throw the tape down without hesitation. It falls into the puddle, rolling around like a memory that refuses to stay. You go back to the table, light a cigarette. Isha. For the first time in days, no one whispered. Chapter 11. Ashes and Names. You arrive at the cemetery on a gray afternoon. Gray, not because of rain, but because the air feels like it's holding its breath. Delphine's grave still has fresh flowers. Someone still comes. You sit down on the bench across from him. In your hand, you hold a list of dead names. People no one talks about anymore except you. You pull out a lighter and burn each page. The paper burned quickly, each black character curling up in a thin wisp of smoke, as if they knew that eventually no one would believe them anymore. Hermia arrives as you burn the last name. Say nothing, just hand you a letter, neatly folded in a faded yellow envelope. No sender. You open it. Inside was a single piece of paper. Handwritten, if a name is not written, no one can read it. If no one reads it, no one dies. You look at Hermia. It was found in one of Jessie's notebooks. She said, hidden behind the plaster wall in room 309. You nod. You got it. You got it at last. The power lies not in the writer, but in the reader. You pull out the last notebook from your pocket, the one that hasn't been opened since you entered the labyrinth. You turn to the first blank page. No more names, no more lists. Just one line you write. Death is not a story. It is the end, and I choose to stop telling it. You leave the cemetery as it starts to rain lightly. Hermia walked beside you. No hand holding, no promise, just walking in step. Like two figures knowing that survival was also a deliberate act. And behind, in the ashes of names, lies lost power. No one writes anymore. No one reads anymore. And the last whispers were lost in the wind. Chapter 12. The Last Contract. You received the telegram at 2:00 a.m. No sender. Just one sentence. 12. One alive. No mercy. You know what they mean. One of the people who had participated in the network was still breathing, not because he escaped, but because his turn had not come yet. It's not that someone forgot. It's on purpose. You light a cigarette. The night wind blowing through the window reminds you something is not finished. You return to Osborne's old headquarters. It's abandoned now, sealed off by the police. But you have a way in. Inside, dust covered every machine, as if time was trying to bury what humanity should not know. You turn on your flashlight and walk towards the room where the ghostly typewriters used to be. All was silent. Only one is still working. Type each character. Evenly. Conway. You sigh. Myra Conway. One of the original, mind-bending software designers for the program. One of the few people who ever brainwashed others, then disappeared when the system collapsed. Hermia mentioned her name. Last place she appeared, Cairo. You wonder why was such a person left behind. Then you understand, because she is the final nail in the coffin. Not a victim, not a tool, is the debtor. You find the address in the old records, an apartment on the top floor of the Alexandria Hotel, a suburb near the Nile. You do not hesitate. 3 days later, you knock on the door of room 901. The sound of high heels came from inside. A silver-haired woman, dressed in black, opened the door. No fear, no surprises. She smiled. I have been waiting for you. Inside the apartment are strange drawings, spiral symbols, and mind maps made from hundreds of small pieces of paper. On the table, there was a headless doll, its mouth sewn shut with red thread. You asked, "Do you still believe in whispers?" She smiled softly. "I don't need to believe them. I just need others to not forget them." You pull out your gun. She doesn't move. You did not come to kill. You come to ask, "Do you have my name?" She nodded. "Used to." "What now?" She was silent. Then say, "Now? I'm waiting to see if you'll write it yourself." You put the gun down. You pull out your pen. Write nothing. Just cut a line across the blank page. A cut, like removing a curse. She looked at you, her eyes trembling slightly. For the first time, you see fear in the eyes of the fearmonger. You say, "No more list. No more contract. Game over here." You leave. No turning back. I didn't hear what she said. And behind you, the sound of the typewriter stops. Fiat Chaimaus. Chapter 13. Echoes without a name. You don't remember how you flew back to London. Just remember, when the plane landed, you looked out the window, and the city had changed color. Not mist, not smoke, but it's a feeling. Something that was once present is gone. And you, the survivor, don't know whether to feel relieved or empty. You go back to your old apartment. The room was deserted. No papers, no records. Everything burned, erased, or disappeared, as if the house itself wanted to purge itself of the secrets that once resided within it. On the table was a single letter. Yellow paper, blue ink, no return address. You open it. There was only one line, written in a slanted, knife-sharp hand. I read your name. No signature, no need. You know whose voice? That night, you don't sleep. You wander across the city, from Soho to Westminster Bridge, from King's Cross Station to Highgate Cemetery. Every step is an echo. You see the faces of the dead on the surface of the Thames. You hear the old laughter in the wind whistling through the alleys. You see yourself in Mark Easterbrook. You used to be reflected in the glass, and you're not sure it's you anymore. It's almost dawn, and you're sitting in an unnamed cafe on Charlotte Street. A stranger sat down at the table opposite, wearing a gray raincoat and a hat. No greeting. Just push a small metal box towards you. You open it. Inside was a blank sheet of paper with no words. You ask, "What should I write?" The stranger smiled, his voice hoarse. "Not writing, remembering." You understand. All that remains is not the list, not the contract, not death, but it is memory. No one can kill what has no name, but no one can save it if they dare not remember it properly. You fold the paper, put it in your pocket. The stranger left. Without a word of goodbye. You look, and for the first time, you're not afraid. Chapter 14. A name you can't erase. You sit in the cafe until the sun comes up. No one entered, no one ordered, no one sees you. Maybe because you're no longer Mark Easterbrook, that name has vanished into the lists, into the cassettes, into the fingers that once trembled as they wrote death. That evening, you return to Detective Corrigan's old office, the place where all the weirdness began. The door was locked. But the library across the street is still open. You enter, following the old path to the basement where Corrigan once hid his unofficial files. In the corner is an old, dusty metal cabinet. You open the last drawer. Still there, a black folder. Name on cover, Project Palomino. Not Pale Horse, not Jesse, but a name erased from history by the one who started it all. Inside is a picture of a man, tall, bald, wears wire-rimmed glasses, not very noticeable. Below the photo is a handwritten caption. Edward R. Mallory, The First Whisper. You have never heard of this name. You search, no results. No records, no address, no relatives, no date of death. You realize this is the name that cannot be erased because it has never been written enough. You light a cigarette. Draw. As the flame touches the tip of the cigarette, you think everything you've ever done is just a faint trace on the surface of something deeper, something that's still working, not by spells, not by poison, but by choices. And those who know how to light the fuse, you hear footsteps on the library stairs. You turn off the flashlight and wait. The basement door was ajar. A woman walked in, holding a black umbrella, her eyes dark. Not surprised to see you. She said, "My name is Mallory." You nod. No need to ask what is your family name. No need to ask daughter or wife. You just say, "And I guess I'm next." She looks at you. Then he smiled, so lightly that it was hard to tell if it was sarcastic or sad. "No, you're the last one to remember. And we need you to keep remembering." You look back at the file, pick it up. Heavier than you think, not because of the paper, but because of what it keeps quiet. You nod. Then, I will write it again. Chapter 15. The Rewrite. You leave the library at 3:03 a.m. The file lay in his hand, the paper dry and brittle, like the memory of a world where people had died for names. It's not raining, but the city is still wet. London at 3 a.m. has no surprises, just things waiting to be remembered. You go to the apartment. On the wooden table, you spread out all the files. Edward Mallory's photographs, handwritten letters, brainwave circuit blueprints, symbolic drawings all point to one thing in common. No one has survived to understand it all. You find a handwritten note nestled in the middle of the document, the ink pale like a whisper from the past. It is not difficult to create fear. It is difficult to keep it alive and to erase it without leaving a trace. That is the art. You look at the text. See yourself in it. You are no longer an investigator, no longer a victim. You are the keeper, the editor, the rewriter. You take a blank notebook and put it on the table. No more list. There is no one left to punish or protect. There's only one thing left. Make a note of what was deleted. The first line you write, they called it the pale horse. But it was never a horse. It was a thought, a prototype, a program that lived off the memories of others. Second line, Mallory is the seed. Jesse is the darkness. But we, the truth seekers, are the soil that nourishes it. Your hand shook slightly as you wrote the third line. I write this not to warn, but to remember, because when no one remembers, evil returns under another name. Softer, more concise, and no one notices. You write through the dawn. No sleep. Don't stop. As dawn breaks through the window, you close the book. On the cover, you do not write your name. Just draw a spiral starting in, winding outward, like everything you've ever known. You put the book in the safe, lock it, burn all remaining records. The ashtray was full of ashes, like the traces of someone who had known too much. You stand up, walk out the door. No luggage, anonymous. There is only memory and the choice not to tell it. Chapter 16. The Man Who Didn't Die. You disappear in the very city you once belonged to. No one recognizes you on the street. No one remembers your name on police records. There are no photos left on the ID system. You are dead and never buried. One afternoon, You find yourself sitting across from yourself in the closed barbershop window. Long hair, beard, darker eyes than before. But what changed most was the look, no longer afraid, just something quieter, sharper, like a blade forged in the ashes. You come to an old printing house in Holloway Street. The owner was old and almost blind, but still remembered how to operate the mechanical printing machine. You pay cash. No questions asked. No names left. You give him the manuscript. You wrote a nameless notebook with only a spiral on the cover. He asked, "Name of the book." You reply, after a few seconds of silence, "The Man Who Didn't Die." He nodded. No further questions asked. 12 bound prints, black ink, rough paper, no ISBN, no barcode, no author. You distribute them like one sows poisonous seeds, one to be on the subway bench, one in the university library, among philosophy books. One at the old bookstore had a window taped with the word. One was sent to Corrigan's old newspaper office, where only return mail remained. You keep one last copy. Do not read again. Just stamp and address to Hermia, the only one who has not forgotten. You leave London in silence. No goodbye. No map, just a feeling. You've laid the first stone, not to start a story, but to bury it. In another city, maybe Marseille, maybe Riga, you sit in a small cafe, make strong coffee, read the local newspaper. Your name is not. No one mentioned the strange deaths. Everything was sunk or sleeping. Oh, you sip your coffee. Bitter, strong. You smile, because sometimes the survivor isn't the hero, but the one who knows how to stop writing. Chapter 17. Ashes Don't Whisper. You rent a small attic room in an old hotel that no one bothers to rate. The windows are crooked. The curtains are as thin as memories. No TV, no phone, only the sigh of the wind through the cracks in the wall. Every morning, you walk down to the docks. Every night, you sit at the bar where the bartender never asks your name. You don't talk to anyone, but sometimes, when the wind chimes jingle the shop door, you look up and wait. No one came, so you know it's not over yet. One night, a man sits down next to you, doesn't look at you, doesn't order anything. You see he's holding a small notebook in his hand, spiral bound. Your heart sinks. You ask where to read from. He said, "First page." Then I couldn't stop. You nod. You know the feeling. He put the book down on the counter, turned to a middle page, pointed to a passage. Memory has no sound, but it is silent as ashes, and ashes do not whisper, but still stick to the hand that touches them. You look, don't remember writing that sentence, but not surprised, because what you started is now separated from you. He turned. Who wrote this? You took out a cigarette, lit it, and said softly, "One person does not die." Silent. Then he left, leaving the notebook behind. You turned the last page, a handwritten note. Not your handwriting. It's being told again, under another name. And this time, people are listening. You know you can't stay any longer, not because of being found, but because the darkness has begun to find someone new to whisper to. And you are no longer the headphones, no longer the recorder. You are the one who knows that ashes never whisper. You step out into the street, walking along the beach. Burn the last notebook you ever kept. Ashes fly up, no twisting, no echo, just ashes. Chapter 18. The silence is the message. You leave the city before the sun has even risen. No luggage. Only silence accompanies you like a familiar shadow. The bus takes you to the border where no one checks your papers. And you think, this is the first time I don't have to prove who I am. Maybe because now you are no longer anyone. At a stop in the mountains, you buy an old radio, shortwave transmitter, heavy, rusty tin case. You turn the frequency knob all night in your wood-paneled motel room. Rustling sounds, broken voices, ancient music from decades no one remembers. Well, at a frequency you weren't looking for. The person is not dead. Please confirm. Are you still listening to us? Your heart stops for a beat. The voice has no name, no distinctive tone, but you know it's not a machine. It's human. It's real. You do not answer, not for fear, but because silence is the message. You put the radio in the drawer, write a line on the case with a small knife. I hear, but I say no more. The next morning, you leave the rest stop. Leave the radio on, tuned to that frequency. If someone else finds it, they will hear the same sound you hear. If they respond, they will be recorded. And the circle opens again. You get the idea. The only one who can break a whisper is the one who doesn't whisper back. On the bus, leaving the mountains, you close your eyes. No dream? Don't think. Just keep the silence inside, like a code that has been re-encoded by yourself. You wrote, you deleted, you listened. Now, you keep quiet. Chapter 19. No one writes the end. You come to a town with no clear name, just an old wooden sign. The paint peeling so badly that one might mistake it for a forgotten warehouse. There's no internet here, no signs, no neon lights, just wind and people who are tired of remembering. You rent a small room at the back of the restaurant where the owner says exactly 4 words. Pay in advance. No questions asked. You nod. It's the closest thing to freedom you'll ever have. The days pass simply. You wash glasses, light a fire, draw maps of the places you've been from memory, without timestamps. At night, you sit down to write, not with a machine, not with ink, using only a stick of charcoal. Draw interlocking circles. On the wall, no head, no tail. One night, someone knocked on the door. You open it, a girl, no more than 10 years old, messy hair, jet black eyes. It gives you a piece of paper. This is yours. I found it in the radio. You open the paper. The text almost faded away. Nobody writes endings. If they did, they would be lying. You look at the girl. Do you understand what this line means? It nodded. Yes, that means you are not dead yet. You don't know whether to laugh or cry. You just nodded, sat down, and took the old charcoal. Continue writing on the wall. Below the last spiral. I don't look for the ending anymore. I just write until no one reads anymore. The next morning, the little girl was gone. The paper is gone too. But on the window were traces of small fingertips, as if someone had just touched the idea of silence and left a trace. You get the idea. It's not that I survived. It's that the story I chose never ended. Chapter 20. The pale horse never had a rider. You stand before a rocky cliff, overlooking a misty valley, where all roads end or begin again. The wind whistles through your old shirt. The wooden stick in your hand is no longer a support, but a reminder that you are still walking. Beneath your feet is a line someone carved in stone. Pale horse has passed here, but no one writes who is the rider. You think of Jesse, of Mallory, of the spiral notebook, of the messages no one sent, but heard. You think of all the people who have died, not because they were killed, but because they believed someone could kill them from a distance. You think of yourself. and the truth never spoken aloud. There is no horse, there is no rider, there is only fear, and the man willing to turn it into a myth. You pull out the last notebook, a blank sheet of paper that has never been written on. You write a single sentence on it. The pale horse has no rider. We ride our own fear. You fold it, place in the rock crevice at the foot of the cliff. Yarum. Yakamav. No one is forced to find it, but if someone looks, they will know. There is no magic. There is no supernatural. There is just us and what we leave in other people's minds. You turn away. Don't leave the past, except it won't move forward with you. You walk down the valley. The wind stopped whistling. The birds started singing. And the sky was no longer dark, just empty, like a piece of paper. There is no ending needed. Only the last one was quiet enough not to continue writing. Chapter 21. I doubt if I shall ever forget the next few days. It appears to me now as a kind of bewildered kaleidoscope without sequence or form. Ginger was removed from the flat to a private nursing home. I was allowed to see her only at visiting hours. Her own doctor, I gather, was inclined to stand on his high horse about the whole business. He could not understand what the fuss was all about. His own diagnosis was quite clear: bronchopneumonia following on influenza, though complicated by certain slightly unusual symptoms. But that, as he pointed out, happens all the time. No case is ever typical, and some people don't respond to antibiotics. And of course, all that he said was true. Ginger had bronchopneumonia. There was nothing mysterious about the disease from which she was suffering. She just had it, and had it badly. I had one interview with the home office psychologist. He was a quaint little cock robin of a man, rising up and down on his toes, with eyes twinkling through very thick lenses. He asked me innumerable questions, half of which I could see no point in whatever. But there must have been a point, for he nodded sapiently at my answers. He entirely refused to commit himself, wherein he was probably wise. He made occasional pronouncements in what I took to be the jargon of his trade. He tried, I think, various forms of hypnotism on Ginger, but by what seemed to be universal consent, no one would tell me very much. Possibly because there was nothing to tell, I avoided my own friends and acquaintances, yet the loneliness of my existence was insupportable. Finally, in an excess of desperation, I rang up Poppy at her flower shop. Would she come out and dine with me? Poppy would love to do so. I took her to the Fantasy. Poppy prattled happily, and I found her company very soothing. But I had not asked her out only for her soothing qualities, having lulled her into a happy stupor with delicious food and drink. I began a little cautious probing. It seemed to be possible that Poppy might know something without being wholly conscious of what it was she knew. I asked her if she remembered my friend Ginger. Poppy said, "Of course," opening her big blue eyes, and asked what Ginger was doing nowadays. "She's very ill." I said, "Poor pet." Poppy looked as concerned as it was possible for her to look, which was not very much. She got herself mixed up with something. I said, "I believe she asked your advice about it. Pale horse stuff. Cost her a terrible lot of money." "Oh," exclaimed Poppy, eyes wider still. "So it was you." For a moment or two, I didn't understand. Then it dawned upon me that Poppy was identifying me with the man whose invalid wife was the bar to Ginger's happiness. So excited was she by this revelation of our love life that she quite failed to be alarmed by the mention of the pale horse. She breathed excitedly. Did it work? It went a bit wrong somehow. I added, the dog it was that died. What dog? Asked Poppy. At sea. I saw that words of one syllable would always be needed where Poppy was concerned. The ER business seems to have recoiled upon Ginger. Did you ever hear of that happening before? Poppy never had. Of course, I said. This stuff they do at the Pale Horse down in Much Deeping. You know about that, don't you? I didn't know where it was. Down in the country somewhere. I couldn't quite make out from Ginger what it is they do. I waited carefully. Rays, isn't it? Said Poppy vaguely. Something like that. From outer space, she added helpfully. Like the Russians, I decided that Poppy was now relying on her limited imagination. Something of that kind. I agreed. But it must be quite dangerous. I mean, for Ginger to get ill like this. But it was your wife who was to be ill and die, wasn't it? Yes, I said, accepting the role Ginger and Poppy had planted on me. But it seems to have gone wrong, backfired. You mean Poppy made a terrific mental effort? Like when you plug an electric iron in wrong and you get a shock? Exactly, I said. Just like that. Did you ever know that sort of thing happened before? Well, not that way. What way? Then? Well, I mean if one didn't pay up afterwards. A man I knew wouldn't. Her voice dropped in an awe-stricken fashion. He was killed in the tube, fell off the platform in front of a train. It might have been an accident. Oh no, said Poppy, shocked at the thought. It was them. I poured some more champagne into Poppy's glass. Here, I felt in front of me was someone who might be helpful, if only you could tear out of her the disassociated facts that were flitting about in what she called her brain. She had heard things said, and assimilated about half of them, and got them jumbled up, and nobody had been very careful what they said because it was only Poppy. The maddening thing was that I didn't know what to ask her. If I said the wrong thing, she would shut up in alarm like a clam and go dumb on me. My wife, I said, is still an invalid, but she doesn't seem any worse. That's too bad, said Poppy sympathetically, sipping champagne. So what do I do next? Poppy didn't seem to know. You see, it was Ginger who I didn't make any of the arrangements. Is there anyone I could get at? There's a place in Birmingham, said Poppy doubtfully. That's closed down, I said. Don't you know anyone else who'd know anything about it? Eileen Brandon might know something, but I don't think so. The introduction of a totally unexpected Eileen Brandon startled me. I asked who Eileen Brandon was. She's terrible, really, said Poppy. Very dim, has her hair very tightly permed, and never wears stiletto heels. She's the end, she added by way of explanation. I was at school with her, but she was pretty dim then. She was frightfully good at geography. What's she got to do with the pale horse? Nothing really. It was only an idea she got. And so she chucked it up. Chucked what up, I asked, bewildered. Her job with C. What's C? Well, I don't really know exactly. They just say C. Something about customers' reactions or research. It's quite a small show. And Eileen Brandon worked for them. What did she have to do? Just go around and ask questions about toothpaste or gas stoves and what kind of sponges you used. Too depressing and dull. I mean, who cares? Presumably C. I felt a slight prickling of excitement. It was a woman employed by an association of this kind who had been visited by Father Gorman on the fatal night. And yes, of course, someone of that kind had called on Ginger at the flat. Here was a link of some kind. Why did she chuck up her job? Because she got bored. I don't think so. They paid quite well, but she got a sort of idea about it that it wasn't what it seemed. She thought that it might be connected, in some way, with the pale horse. Is that it? Well, I don't know. Something of that kind. Anyway, she's working in an espresso coffee bar off Tottenham Court Road now. Give me her address. She's not a bit your type. I don't want to make sexual advances to her, I said brutally. I want some hints on customers' research. I'm thinking of buying some shares in one of those things. Oh, I see, said Poppy. Quite satisfied with this explanation. There was nothing more to be got out of her. So we finished up the champagne, and I took her home and thanked her for a lovely evening. I tried to ring Lejeune next morning but failed. However, after some difficulty, I managed to get through to Jim Corrigan. What about that psychological pipsqueak you brought along to see me? Corrigan. What does he say about Ginger? A lot of long words, but I rather think, Mark, that he's truly baffled. And you know, people do get pneumonia. There's nothing mysterious or out of the way about that. Yes, I said, and several people we know of, whose names were on a certain list, have died of bronchopneumonia, gastroenteritis, bulbar paralysis, tumor on the brain, epilepsy, paratyphoid, and other well-authenticated diseases. I know how you feel. But what can we do? She's worse, isn't she? I asked. Well, yes. Then something's got to be done. Such as, I've got one or two ideas. Going down to much deeping, getting hold of Thurza Gray and forcing her, by scaring the living daylights out of her, to reverse the spell or whatever it is. Well, that might work. Or I might go to Venables, Corrigan said sharply. Venables? But he's out. How can he possibly have any connection with it? He's a cripple. I wonder. I might go there and snatch off that rug affair and see if this atrophied limbs business is true or false. We've looked into all that. Wait, I ran into that little chemist chap, Osborne, down in Much Deeping. I want to repeat to you what he suggested to me. I outlined to him Osborne's theory of impersonation. That man's got a bee in his bonnet, said Corrigan. He's the kind of man who has always got to be right. But Corrigan, tell me, couldn't it be, as he said? It's possible, isn't it? After a moment or two, Corrigan said slowly, Yes. I have to admit, it's possible. But several people would have to be in the know and would have to be paid very heavily for holding their tongues. What of that? He's rolling in money, isn't he? Has Lejeune found out yet how he's made all that money? No, not exactly. I'll admit this to you. There's something wrong about the fellow. He's got a past of some kind. The money's all very cleverly accounted for, in a lot of ways. It isn't possible to check up on it all without an investigation which might take years. The police have had to do that before when they've been up against a financial crook who has covered his traces by a web of infinite complexity. I believe the Inland Revenue has been smelling around Venables for some time, but he's clever. What do you see him as the head of the show? Yes, I do. I think he's the man who plans it all. Perhaps. He sounds as though he'd have the kind of brains for that. I agree. But surely he wouldn't have done anything so crude as killing Father Gorman himself. He might have, if there was sufficient urgency. Father Gorman might have had to be silenced before he could pass on what he had learnt from that woman about the activities of the Pale Horse. Besides, I stopped short. Hello? You still there? Yes, I was thinking. Just an idea that occurred to me. What was it? I've not got it clear yet. Just that real safety could only be achieved one way. I haven't worked it out yet. Anyway, I must go now. I've got a rendezvous at a coffee bar. Didn't know you were in the Chelsea coffee bar, said I'm not. My coffee bar is in Tottenham Court Road. As a matter of fact, I rang off and glanced at the clock. I started for the door when the telephone rang. I hesitated. 10-1. It was Jim Corrigan again, ringing back to know more about my idea. I didn't want to talk to Jim Corrigan just now. I moved towards the door, whilst the telephone rang on persistently, naggingly. Of course, it might be the hospital ginger. I couldn't risk that. Strode across impatiently and jerked the receiver off its hook. Hello, is that you? Mark? Yes? Who is it? It's me? Of course, said the voice reproachfully. Listen, I want to tell you something. Oh, it's you. I recognize the voice of Mrs. Oliver. Look here, I'm in a great hurry. Got to go out. I'll ring you back later. That won't do at all, said Mrs. Oliver firmly. You've got to listen to me now. It's important. Well, you'll have to be quick. I've got an appointment. Pooh, said Mrs. Oliver. You can always be late for an appointment. Everybody is. They'll think all the more of you. No, really, I've got to listen. Mark, this is important. I'm sure it is. It must be. I curbed my impatience as best I could, glancing at the clock. Well, my Millie had tonsillitis. She was quite bad, and she's gone to the country to her sister. I gritted my teeth. I'm frightfully sorry about that. But really, listen, I've not begun yet. Where was I? Oh, yes. Millie had to go to the country. And so I rang up the agency. I always go to the Regency. Such a silly name. I always think like a cinema, I really must. And said, what could they send? And they said it was very difficult just now, which they always say as a matter of fact, but they'd do what they could. Never had I found my friend Ariadne Oliver so maddening. And so, this morning, a woman came along. And who do you think she's turned out to be? I can't imagine. Look, a woman called Edith Binns, comic name. Isn't it? And you actually know her. No, I don't. I never heard of a woman called Edith Binns, but you do know her, and you saw her not very long ago. She had been with that godmother of yours for years. Lady Hesketh Dubois? Oh, with her? Yes. She saw you the day you came to collect some pictures. Well, that's all very nice, and I expect you're very lucky to find her. I believe she's most trustworthy and reliable and all that. Aunt Min said so. But really now, wait, can't you? I haven't got to the point. She sat and talked a great deal about Lady Hesketh Dubois and her last illness and all that sort of thing, because they do love illnesses and death. And then she said it. Said what? The thing that caught my attention. She said something like, poor dear lady, suffering like she did. That nasty thing on her brain. A growth, they say, and she in quite good health up to just before. And pitiful it was to see her in the nursing home and all her hair. Nice thick white hair it was, and always blued regularly once a fortnight. To see it coming out all over the pillow, coming out in handfuls. And then, Mark, I thought of Mary Delafontaine, that friend of mine. Her hair came out. And I remembered what you told me about some girl you'd seen in a Chelsea coffee place fighting with another girl and getting her hair all pulled out in handfuls. Hair doesn't come out as easily as that. Mark, you try. Just try to pull your own hair. Just a little bit of it. Out by the roots. Just try it. You'll see. It's not natural, Mark. For all those people to have hair that comes out by the roots, it's not natural. It must be some special kind of new illness. It must mean something. I clutched the receiver, and my head swam. Things, half-remembered scraps of knowledge, drew together. Rhoda and her dogs on the lawn, an article I had read in a medical journal in New York. Of course, I was suddenly aware that Mrs. Oliver was still quacking happily. Bless you, I said. You're wonderful. I slammed back the receiver, then took it off again. I dialed a number and was lucky enough this time to get Lejeune straight away. Listen, I said, is Ginger's hair coming out by the roots in handfuls? Well, as a matter of fact, I believe it is. High fever, I suppose. Fever my foot, I said. What Ginger's suffering from, what they've all suffered from, is thallium poisoning. Please God, we may be in time. Chapter 22. Are we in time? Will she live? I wandered up and down. I couldn't sit still. Lejeune sat watching me. He was patient and kind. You can be sure that everything possible is being done. It was the same old answer. It did nothing to comfort me. Do they know how to treat thallium poisoning? You don't often get a case of it, but everything possible will be tried. If you ask me, I think she'll pull through. I looked at him. How could I tell if he really believed what he was saying? Was he just trying to soothe me? At any rate, they've verified that it was thallium. Yes, they've verified that. So that's the simple truth behind the pale horse. Poison. No witchcraft. No hypnotism. No scientific death rays. Plain poisoning. And she flung that at me. Damn her. Flung it in my face. Laughing in her cheek all the while. I expect. Who are you talking about? About, though. There's a gray. That first afternoon, when I went to tea theirs, talked about the Borgias and all the buildup of rare and untraceable poisons, the poisoned gloves, and all the rest of it. Common white arsenic, she said, and nothing else. This was just as simple. All that hooey, the trance and the white cocks, and the brazier and the pentagrams and the voodoo and the reversed crucifix, all that was for the crudely superstitious. And the famous box was another bit of hooey for the contemporary minded. We don't believe in spirits and witches and spells nowadays. But we're a gullible lot when it comes to rays and waves and psychological phenomena. That box, I bet, is nothing but a nice little assembly of electrical show-off, colored bulbs, and humming valves. Because we live in daily fear of radio fallout and strontium-90 and all the rest of it, we're amenable to suggestion along the line of scientific talk. The whole setup at the Pale Horse was bogus. The Pale Horse was a stalking horse, neither more nor less. Whooshi. Attention was to be focused on that, so that we'd never suspect what might be going on in another direction. The beauty of it was that it was quite safe for them. Thurza Gray could boast out loud about what occult powers she had or could command. She could never be brought into court and tried for murder on that issue. Her box could have been examined and proved to be harmless. Any court would have ruled that the whole thing was nonsense and impossible. And, of course, that's exactly what it was. "Do you think they're all three in it?" asked Lejeune. "I shouldn't think so. Bella's belief in witchcraft is genuine. I should say, she believes in her own powers and rejoices in them. The same with Sybil. She's got a genuine gift of mediumship. She goes into a trance, and she doesn't know what happens. She believes everything that Thurza tells her. So Thurza is the ruling spirit." I said slowly, "As far as the Pale Horse is concerned. Yes, but she's not the real brains of the show. The real brain works behind the scenes. He plans and organizes. It's all beautifully dovetailed. You know, everyone has his or her job, and no one has anything on anyone else. Bradley runs the financial and legal side. Apart from that, he doesn't know what happens elsewhere. He's handsomely paid, of course. So is Thurza Gray. You seem to have got it all taped to your satisfaction," said Lejeune dryly. "I haven't, not yet. But we know the basic necessary fact. It's the same as it has been through the ages, crude and simple. Just plain poison, the dear old death potion. What put thallium into your head?" Several things suddenly came together. The beginning of the whole business was the thing I saw that night in Chelsea. A girl whose hair was being pulled out by the roots by another girl. And she said, it didn't really hurt. It wasn't bravery, as I thought. It was simple fact. It didn't hurt. I read an article on thallium poisoning when I was in America. A lot of workers in a factory died one after the other. Their deaths were put down to astonishingly varied causes. Amongst them, if I remember rightly, were paratyphoid, apoplexy, alcoholic neuritis, bulbar paralysis, epilepsy, gastroenteritis, and so on. Then there was a woman who poisoned 7 people. Diagnosis included brain tumor, encephalitis, and lobar pneumonia. The symptoms vary a good deal. I understand. They may start with diarrhea and vomiting, or there may be a stage of intoxication. Again, it may begin with pain in the limbs and be put down as polyneuritis or rheumatic fever or polio. One patient was put in an iron lung. Sometimes there's pigmentation of the skin. You talk like a medical dictionary naturally. I've been looking it up. But one thing always happens sooner or later. The hair falls out. Thallium used to be used for depilation at one time, particularly for children with ringworm. Then it was found to be dangerous. But it's occasionally given internally, but with very careful dosage going by the weight of the patient. It's mainly used nowadays for rats. I believe it's tasteless, soluble, and easy to buy. There's only one thing. Poisoning mustn't be suspected. Lejeune nodded. Exactly, he said. Hence the insistence by the pale horse that the murderer must stay away from his intended victim. No suspicion of foul play ever arises. Why should it? There's no interested party who could have had access to food or drink. No purchase of thallium or any other poison is ever made by him or her. That's the beauty of it. The real work is done by someone who has no connection whatever with the victim. Someone, I think, who appears once and once only. He paused. Any ideas on that only one? A common factor appears to be that on every occasion some pleasant, harmless-seeming woman calls with a questionnaire on behalf of a domestic research unit. You think that that woman is the one who plants the poison? As a sample. Something like that. I don't think it's quite as simple as that, I said slowly. I have an idea that the women are quite genuine, but they come into it somehow. I think we may be able to find out something if we talk to a woman called Eileen Brandon, who works in an espresso off Tottenham Court Road. Eileen Brandon had been fairly accurately described by Poppy, allowing, that is to say, for Poppy's own particular point of view. Her hair was neither like a chrysanthemum, nor an unruly bird's nest. It was waved back close to her head. She wore the minimum of makeup, and her feet were encased in what is called, I believe, sensible shoes. Her husband had been killed in a motor accident, she told us, and left her with 2 small children before her present employment. She had been employed by a firm called Customers Reactions Classified for over a year. She had left of her own accord, as she had not cared for the type of work. Why didn't you care for it? Mrs. Brandon Lejeune asked the question. She looked at him. You're a detective inspector of police, is that right? Quite right. Mrs. Brandon, you think there's something wrong about that firm? It's a matter I'm inquiring into. Did you suspect something of that kind? Is that why you left? I've nothing definite to go upon. Nothing definite that I could tell you. Naturally, we understand that. This is a confidential inquiry. I see. But there is really very little I could say. You can say why you wanted to leave. I had a feeling that there were things going on that I didn't know about. You mean you didn't think it was a genuine concern? Something of the kind. It didn't seem to me to be run in a businesslike way. I suspected that there must be some ulterior object behind it. But what that object was, I still don't know. Lejeune asked more questions as to exactly what work she had been asked to do. Lists of names in a certain neighborhood had been handed out. Her job was to visit those people, ask certain questions, and note down the answers. And what struck you as wrong about that? The questions did not seem to me to follow up any particular line of research. They seemed desultory, almost haphazard, as though, how can I put it, they were a cloak for something else. Have you any idea what the something else might have been? No. That's what puzzled me. She paused a moment and then said doubtfully, I did wonder, at one time, whether the whole thing could have been organized with a view perhaps to burglaries, a spying out of the land, so to speak. But that couldn't be it, because I was never asked for any description of the rooms, fastenings, etc., or when the occupants of the flat or house were likely to be out or away. What articles did you deal with in the questions? It varied. Sometimes it was foodstuffs, cereals, cake mixes, or it might be soap flakes and detergents. Sometimes cosmetics, face powders, lipsticks, creams, etc. Sometimes patent medicines or remedies, brands of aspirin, cough pastilles, sleeping pills, pep pills, gargles, mouthwashes, indigestion remedies, and so on. You are not asked. Lejeune spoke casually. To supply samples of any particular goods, no, nothing of that kind. You merely asked questions and noted down the answers. Yes. What was supposed to be the object of these inquiries? That was what seemed so odd. We were never told exactly. It was supposed to be done in order to supply information to certain manufacturing firms, but it was an extraordinarily amateurish way of going about it. Not systematic at all. Would it be possible? Do you think that amongst the questions you were told to ask, there was just one question or one group of questions that was the object of the enterprise, and that the others might have been camouflage? She considered the point, frowning a little. Then she nodded. Yes, she said. That would account for the haphazard choice, but I haven't the least idea what question or questions were the important ones. Lejeune looked at her keenly. There must be more to it than what you've told us, he said gently. That's the point. There isn't really. I just felt there was something wrong about the whole setup. And then I talked to another woman, a Mrs. Davis. You talked to a Mrs. Davis? Yes. Lejeune's voice remained quite unchanged. She wasn't happy about things, either. And why wasn't she happy? She'd overheard something. What had she overheard? I told you. I couldn't be definite. She didn't tell me in so many words, only that, from what she had overheard, the whole setup was a racket of some kind. It's not what it seems to be. That is what she said. Then she said, oh, well, it doesn't affect us. The money's very good, and we're not asked to do anything that's against the law, so I don't see that we need bother our heads about it. That was all. There was one other thing she said. I don't know what she meant by it. She said, sometimes I feel like Typhoid Mary. At the time, I didn't know what she meant. Lejeune took a paper from his pocket and handed it to her. Do any of the names on that list mean anything to you? Did you call upon any of them that you can remember? I wouldn't remember. She took the paper. I saw so many. She paused as her eye went down the list. She said, Ormerod. You remember an Ormerod number? But Mrs. Davis mentioned him once. He died very suddenly. Didn't he? Cerebral hemorrhage. It upset her. She said, he was on my list a fortnight ago. Looked like a man in the pink of condition. It was after that she made the remark about Typhoid Mary. She said, some of the people I call on seem to curl up their toes and pass out just from having one look at me. She laughed about it and said it was a coincidence, but I don't think she liked it much. However, she said she wasn't going to worry. And that was all. Well, tell me. It was some time later. I hadn't seen her for a while, but we met one day in a restaurant in Soho. I told her that I'd left the CRC and got another job. She asked me why. And I told her I'd felt uneasy, not knowing what was going on. She said, perhaps you've been wise, but it's good money in short hours. And after all, We've all got to take our chance in this life. I've not had much luck in my life, and why should I care what happens to other people? I said, I don't understand what you're talking about. What exactly is wrong with that show? She said, I can't be sure, but I'll tell you. I recognized someone the other day, coming out of a house where he'd no business to be and carrying a bag of tools. What was he doing with those, I'd like to know? She asked me, too, if I'd ever come across a woman who ran a pub called the Pale Horse somewhere. I asked her what the Pale Horse had to do with it, and what did she say? She laughed and said, read your Bible. Mrs. Brandon added, I don't know what she meant. That was the last time I saw her. I don't know where she is now, whether she's still with C.R.C. or whether she's left. Mrs. Davis is dead, said Lejeune. Eileen Brandon looked startled. Dead, but how pneumonia? 2 months ago. Oh, I see. I'm sorry. Is there anything else you can tell us? Mrs. Brandon. I'm afraid not. I have heard other people mention that phrase, the pale horse. But if you ask them about it, they shut up at once. They look afraid, too. She looked uneasy. I don't want to be mixed up in anything dangerous. Inspector Lejeune, I've got 2 small children. Honestly, I don't know anything more than I've told you. He looked at her keenly. Then he nodded his head and let her go. That takes us a little further, said Lejeune, when Eileen Brandon had gone. Mrs. Davis got to know too much. She tried to shut her eyes to the meaning of what was going on, but she must have had a very shrewd suspicion of what it was. Yeah. Then she was suddenly taken ill, and when she was dying, she sent for a priest and told him what she knew and suspected. The question is, how much did she know that list of people? I should say, is a list of people she had called on in the course of her job and who had subsequently died. Hence the remark about Typhoid Mary. The real question is, who was it she recognized coming out of a house where he had no business to be and pretending to be a workman of some kind? That must have been the knowledge that made her dangerous. If she recognized him, he may have recognized her, and he may have realized that she had recognized him. If she'd passed on that particular item to Father Gorman, then it was vital that Father Gorman should be silenced at once before he could pass it on. He looked at me. You agree, don't you? That must have been the way of it. Oh, yes, I said. I agree. And you've an idea, perhaps, who the man is. I've an idea. But I know. We haven't a particle of evidence. He was silent a moment, then he got up. But we'll get him, he said. Make no mistake. Once we know definitely who it is, there are always ways. We'll try every damned one of them. Chapter 23. It was some 3 weeks later that a car drove up to the front door of Prior's Court. 4 men got out. I was one of them. There was also Detective Inspector Lejeune and Detective Sergeant Lee. The 4th man was Mr. Osborne, who could hardly contain his delight and excitement at being allowed to be one of the party. You must hold your tongue. You know, Lejeune admonished him. Yes, indeed, Inspector, you can count on me absolutely. I won't utter a word. Mind you don't. I feel it's a privilege. A great privilege. Though I don't quite understand. But nobody was entering into explanations at this moment. Lejeune rang the bell and asked for Mr. Venables. looking rather like a deputation. The four of us were ushered in. If Venables was surprised at our visit, he did not show it. His manner was courteous in the extreme. I thought again, as he wheeled his chair a little back so as to widen the circle round him. What a very distinctive appearance the man had. The Adam's apple moving up and down between the wings of his old-fashioned collar. The haggard profile with its curved nose like a bird of prey. Nice to see you again. Easterbrook, you seem to spend a lot of time down in this part of the world nowadays. There was a faint malice in his tone. I thought, he resumed. And Detective Inspector Lejeune, is it that rouses my curiosity? I must admit, so peaceful in these parts, so free from crime. And yet, a detective inspector calls. What can I do for you? Detective Inspector Lejeune was very quiet, very suave. There is a matter on which we think you might be able to assist us. Mr. Venables, that has a rather familiar ring, does it not? In what way do you think I can assist you? On October 7th, a parish priest of the name of Father Gorman was murdered in West Street, Paddington. I have been given to understand that you were in the neighborhood at that time between 7:45 and 8:15 in the evening, and you may have seen something that may have a bearing on the matter. Was I really in the neighborhood at that time? Do you know? I doubt it. I very much doubt it. As far as I can recall, I have never been in that particular district of London. Speaking from memory, I do not even think I was in London at all just then. I go to London occasionally for an interesting day in the sailing room, and now and then for a medical checkup with Sir William Dugdale of Harley Street. I believe Mr. Venables stared at him coldly. You are very well informed. Inspector, not quite so well as I should like to be. However, I'm disappointed that you can't assist me in the way that I hoped. I think I owe it to you to explain the facts connected with the death of Father Gorman. Certainly, if you like. It is a name I have never heard until now. Father Gorman had been called out on that particular foggy evening to the deathbed of a woman nearby. She had become entangled with a criminal organization. At first almost unwittingly, but later, certain things made her suspect the seriousness of the matter. It was an organization which specialized in the removal of unwanted persons for a substantial fee. Naturally, hardly a new idea, murmured Venables. In America, but there were some novel features about this particular organization. To begin with, the removals were ostensibly brought about by what might perhaps be called psychological means, what is referred to as a death wish, said to be present in everyone, is stimulated, so that the person in question obligingly commits suicide. It sounds, if I may say so, Inspector, too good to be true. Not suicide. Mr. Venables, the person in question dies a perfectly natural death. Come now, come now. Do you really believe that? How very unlike our hard-headed police force. The headquarters of this organization are said to be a place called the Pale Horse. Ah, now I begin to understand. So that is what brings you to our pleasant rural neighborhood. My friend Thurza Gray, and her nonsense whether she believes it herself or not. I've never been able to make out. But nonsense it is. She has a silly, mediumistic friend, and the local witch cooks her dinners quite brave to eat them hemlock in the soup any moment. And the three old dears have worked up quite a local reputation. Very naughty, of course, but don't tell me Scotland Yard, or wherever you come from. Take it all seriously. We take it very seriously indeed. Mr. Venables, you really believe that Thirza spouts some highfalutin nonsense? Sybil throws a trance, and Bella does black magic, and as a result somebody dies. Oh no, Mr. Venables, the cause of death is simpler than that. He paused a moment. The cause is thallium poisoning. There was a momentary pause. What did you say? Poisoning by thallium salts. Quite plain and straightforward. Only it had to be covered up. And what better method of covering up than a pseudoscientific, psychological setup full of modern jargon and reinforced by old superstitions, calculated to distract attention from the plain fact of administration of poison. Thallium? Mr. Venables frowned. I don't think I've ever heard of it. No, used extensively as rat poison. Occasionally, as a depilatory for children with ringworm, can be obtained quite easily. Incidentally, there's a packet of it tucked away in a corner of your potting shed. In my potting shed? It sounds most unlikely. It's there all right. We've examined some of it for testing purposes. Venables became slightly excited. Someone must have put it there. I know nothing about it. Nothing at all. Is that so? You're a man of some wealth, aren't you, Mr. Venables? What has that got to do with what we are talking about? The Inland Revenue have been asking some awkward questions lately. I believe, as to source of income. That is, the curse of living in England is undoubtedly our system of taxation. I have thought very seriously of late of going to live in Bermuda. I don't think you'll be going to Bermuda just yet a while. Mr. Venables, is that a threat? Inspector? Because if so, no. Mr. Venables, just an expression of opinion. Would you like to hear just how this little racket was worked? You are certainly determined to tell me. It's very well organized. Financial details are arranged by a debarred solicitor called Mr. Bradley. Mr. Bradley has an office in Birmingham. Prospective clients visit him there and do business. This is to say, there is a bet on whether someone will die within a stated period. Mr. Bradley, who is fond of a wager, is usually pessimistic in his prognostications. The client is usually more hopeful. When Mr. Bradley wins his bet, the money has to be paid over promptly, or else something unpleasant is liable to happen. That is all Mr. Bradley has to do, make a bet. Simple, isn't it? The client next visits the Pale Horse. A show is put on by Miss Thirza Gray and her friends, which usually impresses him in the way it is meant to do. Now, for the simple facts behind the scenes. Certain women, bona fide employees of one of the many consumer research concerns, are detailed to canvass a particular neighborhood with a questionnaire. What bread do you prefer? What toilet articles and cosmetics? What laxative, tonics, sedatives, indigestion mixtures, etc.? People nowadays are conditioned to answering quizzes. They seldom object. And so to the last step, simple, bold, successful. The only action performed by the originator of the scheme in person. He may be wearing a mansion flat porter's uniform. He may be a man calling to read the gas or the electric meter. He may be a plumber or an electrician or a workman of some kind, whatever he is, he will have what appear to be the proper credentials with him if anyone asks to see them. Most people don't. Whatever role he is playing, his real object is simple: the substitution of a preparation he brings with him for a similar article which he knows by reason of the CRC questionnaires that his victim uses. He may tap pipes, or examine meters, or test water pressure, but that is his real object. Having accomplished it, he leaves, and is not seen in that neighborhood again. And for a few days perhaps nothing happens, but sooner or later, the victim displays symptoms of illness. A doctor is called in, but has no reason to suspect anything out of the ordinary. He may question what food and drink, etc. The patient has taken, but he is unlikely to suspect the ordinary proprietary article that the patient has taken for years. And you see the beauty of the scheme. Mr. Venables, the only person who knows what the head of the organization actually does, is the head of the organization himself. There is no one to give him away. So how do you know so much? Demanded Mr. Venables pleasantly. When we have suspicions of a certain person, there are ways of making sure, indeed, such as we needn't go into all of them. But there's the camera. For instance, all kinds of ingenious devices are possible nowadays. A man can be snapped without his suspecting the fact. We've got some excellent pictures, for instance, of a uniform flat porter and a gas man and so on. There are such things as false mustaches, different dentures, etc. But our man has been recognized quite easily, first by Mrs. Barkey's Mark Easterbrook, alias Miss Catherine Corrigan, and also by a woman called Edith Binns. Recognition is an interesting thing. Mr. Venables, for instance, this gentleman here, Mr. Osborne, is willing to swear he saw you following Father Gorman in Barton Street on the night of the 7th of October, about 8 o'clock, and I did see you. Mr. Osborne leaned forward, twitching with excitement. I described you exactly, rather too exactly, perhaps, said Lejeune. Because you didn't see Mr. Venables that night when you were standing outside the doorway of your shop. You weren't standing there at all. You were across the street yourself, following Father Gorman until he turned into West Street, and you came up with him and killed him. Mr. Zachariah Osborne said what it might have been ludicrous. It was ludicrous. The dropped jaw, the staring eyes. Let me introduce you. Mr. Venables to Mr. Zachariah Osborne, pharmacist, late of Barton Street, Paddington. You'll feel a personal interest in him when I tell you that Mr. Osborne, who has been under observation for some time, was unwise enough to plant a packet of thallium salts in your potting shed. Not knowing of your disability, he'd amused himself by casting you as the villain of the piece, and being a very obstinate, as well as a very stupid man. He refused to admit he'd made a bloomer. Stupid. You dare to call me stupid? If you'd any idea what I've done, what I can do. Osborne shook and spluttered with rage. Lejeune summed him up carefully. I was reminded of a man playing a fish. You shouldn't have tried to be so clever. You know, he said reprovingly. Why? If you just sat back in that shop of yours and let well alone, I shouldn't be here now, warning you, as it's my duty to do, that anything you say will be taken down. And it was then that Mr. Osborne began to scream. Chapter 24. Look here, Lejeune. There are lots of things I want to know. The formality's over. I had got Lejeune to myself. We were sitting together with two large tankards of beer opposite us. Yes, Mr. Easterbrook. I gather it was a surprise to you. It certainly was. My mind was set on Venables. You never gave me the least hint. I couldn't afford to give hints. Mr. Easterbrook, you have to play these things close to your chest. They're tricky. The truth is, we hadn't a lot to go on. That's why we had to stage the show in the way we did with Venables' cooperation. We had to lead Osborne right up the garden path and then turn on him suddenly and hope to break him down. And it worked. Is he mad? I asked. I'd say he's gone over the edge now. He wasn't to begin with, of course, but it does something to you. You know, killing people. It makes you feel powerful and larger than life. It makes you feel you're God Almighty, but you're not. You're only a nasty bit of goods that's been found out. And when that fact's presented to you suddenly, your ego just can't stand it. You scream and you rant, and you boast of what you've done and how clever you are. Well, you saw him. I nodded. So, Venables was in on the performance you put up. I said, did he like the idea of cooperating? It amused him. I think, said Lejeune. Besides, he was impertinent enough to say that one good turn deserves another. And what did he mean by that cryptic remark? Well, I shouldn't be telling you this, said Lejeune. This is off the record. There was a big outbreak of bank robberies about 8 years ago. The same technique every time. And they got away with it. The raids were cleverly planned by someone who took no part in the actual operation. That man got away with a lot of money. We may have had our suspicions who it was, but we couldn't prove it. He was too clever for us, especially on the financial angle, and he's had the sense never to try and repeat his success. I'm not saying more. He was a clever crook, but he wasn't a murderer. No lives were lost. My mind went back to Zachariah Osborne. Did you always suspect Osborne? I asked. Right from the beginning. Well, he would draw attention to himself, said Lejeune. As I told him, if he'd only sat back and done nothing, we'd never have dreamed that the respectable pharmacist, Mr. Zachariah Osborne, had anything to do with the business. But it's a funny thing. That's just what murderers can't do. There they are, sitting pretty, safe as houses, but they can't let well alone. I'm sure I don't know why. The desire for death. I suggested a variant of Thurza Gray's theme. The sooner you forget all about Miss Thurza Gray and the things she told you, the better, said Lejeune severely. No, he said thoughtfully. I think really it's loneliness. The knowledge that you're such a clever chap, but that there's nobody you can talk to about it. You haven't told me when you started to suspect him. I said, well, straight away, he started telling lies. We asked for anyone who'd seen Father Gorman that night to communicate with us. Mr. Osborne communicated, and the statement he made was a palpable lie. He'd seen a man following Father Gorman, and he described the features of that man, but he couldn't possibly have seen him across the street on a foggy night. An aquiline nose and profile he might have seen, but not an Adam's apple. That was going too far. Of course, that lie might have been innocent enough. Mr. Osborne might just want to make himself important. Lots of people are like that. But it made me focus my attention on Mr. Osborne, and he was really rather a curious person. At once, he started to tell me a lot about himself. Very unwise of him. He gave me a picture of someone who had always wanted to be more important than he was. He'd not been content to go into his father's old-fashioned business. He'd gone off and tried his fortunes on the stage. But he obviously hadn't been a success, probably, I should say, because he couldn't take production. Nobody was going to dictate to him the way he should play a part. He was probably genuine enough when he told of his ambition to be a witness in a murder trial. Successfully identifying a man who had come in to buy poison. His mind ran on those lines a good deal. I should think. Of course, we don't know at what point and when the idea occurred to him that he might become a really big criminal. A man so clever that he could never be brought to justice. But that's all surmise. To go back, Osborne's description of the man he had seen that night was interesting. It was so obviously a description of a real person whom he had at one time seen. It's extraordinarily difficult, to make up a description of anybody. Eyes, nose, chin, ears, bearing, all the rest of it. If you try it, you'll find yourself unconsciously describing somebody that you've noticed somewhere in a tram or a train or an omnibus. Osborne was obviously describing a man with somewhat unusual characteristics. I'd say that he noticed Venables sitting in his car one day in Bournemouth and was struck by his appearance. If he'd seen him that way, he wouldn't realize the man was a cripple. Another reason that kept me interested in Osborne was that he was a pharmacist. I thought it just possible that list we had might tie up with the narcotic trade somewhere. Actually, that wasn't so. And I might, therefore, have forgotten all about Mr. Osborne. If Mr. Osborne himself hadn't been determined to keep in the picture, he wanted, you see, to know just what we were doing. And so he writes to say that he's seen the man in question at a church fete in Much Deeping. He still didn't know that Mr. Venables was a paralysis case. When he did find that out, he hadn't the sense to shut up. That was his vanity. Typical criminal's vanity. He wasn't going to admit for one moment that he'd been wrong. Like a fool. He stuck to his guns and put forward all sorts of preposterous theories. I had a very interesting visit to him at his bungalow in Bournemouth. The name of it ought to have given the show away. Everest. That's what he called it. And he'd hung up a picture of Mount Everest in the hall. Told me how interested he was in Himalayan exploration. But that was the kind of cheap joke that he enjoyed. Everest. That was his trade, his profession. He did give people eternal rest on payment of a suitable fee. It was a wonderful idea. One's got to hand him that. The whole setup was clever. Bradley in Birmingham, Thurza Gray holding her seances in Much Deeping. And who was to suspect Mr. Osborne, who had no connection with Thurza Gray. No connection with Bradley in Birmingham. No connection with the victim. The actual mechanics of the thing was child's play to a pharmacist. As I say, if only Mr. Osborne had had the sense to keep quiet. But what did he do with the money, I asked? After all, he did it for money, presumably. Oh, yes, he did it for the money, had grand visions, no doubt, of himself traveling, entertaining, being a rich and important person. But of course, he wasn't the person he imagined himself to be. I think his sense of power was exhilarated by the actual performance of murder. To get away with murder again and again intoxicated him. And what's more, he'll enjoy himself in the dock. You see, if he doesn't, the central figure with all eyes upon him. But what did he do with the money, I demanded. Oh, that's very simple, said Lejeune, though I don't know that I should have thought of it unless I'd noticed the way he'd furnished the bungalow. He was a miser, of course. He loved money, and he wanted money, but not for spending. That bungalow was sparsely furnished, and all with stuff that he'd bought cheap at sales. He didn't like spending money. He just wanted to have it. Do you mean he banked it all? Oh, no, said Lejeune. I'd say we'll find it somewhere under the floor in that bungalow of his. Both Lejeune and I were silent for some minutes while I contemplated the strange creature that was Zachariah Osborne. Corrigan, said Lejeune dreamily, would say it was all due to some gland in his spleen, or his sweetbread, or something either overfunctioning or underproducing. I never can remember which. I'm a simple man. I think he's just a wrong'un. What beats me, it always does, is how a man can be so clever and yet be such a perfect fool. One imagines a mastermind, I said, as some grand and sinister figure of evil. Lejeune shook his head. It's not like that at all. He said, evil is not something superhuman. It's something less than human. Your criminal is someone who wants to be important, but who never will be important, because he'll always be less than a man. Chapter 25. At much deeping. Everything was refreshingly normal. Rhoda was busy doctoring dogs. This time, I think, it was deworming. She looked up as I came in and asked me if I would like to assist. I refused and asked where Ginger was. She's gone over to the Pale Horse. What, she said she had something to do there. But the house is empty. I know. She'll overtire herself. She's not fit yet. How you fuss. Mark, Ginger's all right. Have you seen Mrs. Oliver's new book? It's called The White Cockatoo. It's over on the table there. God bless Mrs. Oliver. And Edith Binns, too. Who on earth is Edith Binns? A woman who has identified a photograph. Also faithful retainer to my late godmother. Nothing you say seems to make sense. What's the matter with you? I did not reply, but set out for the Pale Horse. Just before I got there, I met Mrs. Dane Calthrop. She greeted me enthusiastically. All along I knew I was being stupid, she said, but I didn't see how. Taken in by trappings, she waved an arm towards the inn, empty and peaceful in the late autumn sunshine. The wickedness was never there, not in the sense it was supposed to be. No fantastic trafficking with the devil, no black and evil splendor, just parlor tricks done for money and human life of no account. That's real wickedness. Nothing grand or big, just petty and contemptible. You and Inspector Lejeune would seem to agree about things. I like that man, said Mrs. Dane Calthrop. Let's go into the Pale Horse and find Ginger. What's she doing there, cleaning up something? We went in through the low doorway. There was a strong smell of turpentine. Ginger was busy with rags and bottles. She looked up as we entered. She was still very pale and thin. A scarf wound round her head where the hair had not yet grown, a ghost of her former self. She's all right, said Mrs. Dane Calthrop, reading my thoughts, as usual. Look, said Ginger triumphantly. She indicated the old inn sign on which she was working. The grime of years removed. The figure of the rider on the horse was plainly discernible, a grinning skeleton with gleaming bones. Mrs. Dane Calthrop's voice, deep and sonorous, spoke behind me. Revelation, chapter 6, verse 8. And I looked, and behold a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed with him. We were silent for a moment or two, and then Mrs. Dane Calthrop, who was not one to be afraid of anticlimax, said, "So that's that," in the tone of one who puts something in the wastepaper basket. "I must go now," she added. "Mother's meeting." She paused in the doorway, nodded at Ginger, and said unexpectedly, "You'll make a good mother." For some reason, Ginger blushed, crimson. "Ginger," I said, will I what make a good mother?" "You know what I mean." "Perhaps, but I'd prefer a firm offer." I made her a firm offer. After an interlude, Ginger demanded, "Are you quite sure you don't want to marry that Hermia creature?" "Good Lord," I said. "I quite forgot." I took a letter from my pocket. This came 3 days ago, asking me if I'd come to the old Vic with her to see Love's Labour's Lost. Ginger took the letter out of my hand and tore it up. "If you want to go to the old Vic in future," she said firmly, "you'll go with me